somebody had called into some radio station, I was listening, one said their father died of a heart attack, and it was marked down as corona.
We're live. I'm going to put my microphone in my pocket and see if that works. All right, can y'all get your microphones on, please? Y'all good? Mr. Powers, you good? Okay. We'll go ahead and call us into session, and thank you guys for being here for our budget work session. The only item on the agenda is further budget discussion for the fiscal year 2021. I'd like to start us out with the invocation and pledge by Councilman Feimster.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we appreciate how you take care of us. And we pray that you will protect us all from the deadly epidemic that has plagued the world. We pray that the President, Congress, and the Supreme Court will continue to carry out their duties as prescribed by law. We pray for our governor, the South Carolina Senate and Representatives, as they work toward improving our roads and add new industry to our state. We also pray for the municipal leaders of Pickens County who are now serving and those who will take office for the first time in the coming year. We pray that you will protect those in the military and the law officers who put their lives at risk on a regular basis. We pray that you will guide us in our decision making tonight. We make our prayer in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Feimster. We're going to jump straight into it. I know that I appreciate you guys taking the time and making the change to meet tonight on a Thursday night, which is, we're not usually, I think it's the first Thursday night we've met on since I've been here, if I can remember right. But thank you guys for making arrangements to do that. Councilman Hudson is unable to be here. Continue to keep him in your prayers. And let's go ahead and begin the conversation. One of the things that we want to you guys have got a list of some of the questions. One of the things that we were asking specifically about was Tri-County Tech, and you should have gotten emailed, and then there's on your desk there a letter to me and from President DeHay, and kind of an explanation on Tri-County as far as their budget request to Anderson, Oconee, and Pickens for fiscal year 2021. Mr. Roper, did you want to say anything about this?
I've heard Mr. Garino about the specifics of the request.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we talked previous. You have the detailed sheet. The main thing that's going up on theirs is $24,000 for utilities, and then insurance and security, they had $44,000 on that. So the overall increase was about $74,000, and we pay approximately 25%. Oconee pays 25%, and then Anderson pays 50% of that. I think there was one question about, do we have to pay for the amount?
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you some of the numbers. A $44,000 increase, they say insurance and security. Well, which is it?
I think they put them both in the same.
I'd like to know why.
Well, if on the detailed sheet on the assumptions they have back there, the insurance, it says per reserve, insurance reserve fund, they're looking at a 15 to 45% increase from 20 to 21. And then the security is estimated increase of 2.5% less, 10,000 of non-reoccurring expenses.
My understanding is that our responsibility is for maintenance of buildings, okay? Insurance is not for, and I don't know, does that fall into our preview? And security sounds to me, and I got several questions about this.
Okay.
And the questions I want them to answer is it security is an employee thing. It's not part of maintenance of the facilities. Our specific agreement with them years and years ago was maintenance of facilities, which would be electric bills, which I'd like to know how much our electric bills went up last year. A 4% increase is large. I don't think Duke's going up 4%, it's a guess. And I don't think it's any close to what it's gonna be. I don't think there will be an increase. Have we had an increase in our power bill?
I'd have to look overall. We've had increase because of the detention center, yes.
Yeah, but this building is already done, and we were told that we were gonna be saving money because they're closing down other areas, and this was gonna be consolidations. As y'all remember the whole thing, but one of the things I would like to check is to understand exactly what we are supposed to be paying for.
And if you recall, I had actually, Mr. Greeno and I were talking just a few moments ago because we didn't recall the specifics of that very thing. But I had to go back and look in some of my records and found, you remember it was probably 3 years ago, we got a legal opinion from Pope Flynn about exactly what are the parameters. And it talked about maintenance, you're right, but it also talks about operations. So state law says that we're responsible for our proportionate share of not only maintenance, but also operations costs. And so it's also capital of the initial construction of Tri-County Tech. Those were all involved in the statute. So we got a legal opinion on that from Pope Flynn a few years back. And operation and maintenance, if we don't pay it, then what they have the right to do is add it to the student differential fee.
I understand what we're gonna have to do here.
Right.
What I want is the thing when you know you have an open check, you write a bigger check. And I would like to have some accountability to what we give them. And, you know, we went through this thing when we first started talking about this new building that this council ended up funding, and it does not state capital expense is all done by the state. We chose as a county to pay for that. I'd like to see that opinion from them, just to refresh my memory a little bit on it.
Okay.
But, you know, that was a huge debate on this, that it wasn't our responsibility, but I just want to make very clear what our responsibilities are, because I don't want things added on justifying price increases to all the counties, unless it's something we're legally obligated to do. And, you know, if it turns out it's not, it's a question. Okay, but I really want to know.
What I'll do is when we conclude this meeting, I'll send that opinion so we can all be on the same page and be refreshed on that to Megan. I just read it just a short while ago because I was asking the same question.
And just to let you guys know, they had wanted to come here and present specifically tonight, and I said, well, you've given us what we need right now. Let us talk about it, and if we need them to come for our June 1st meeting, we can do that.
Yes.
So if their power bills don't go up 4%, where does that money go? We're projecting an increase. You know, we do that all the time. But
So that's a good question. If there's a savings, what does that go towards? I mean,
I don't know specifically. I would assume they roll it over into the fund and they keep that in, and then it possibly offsets future increases.
I'd like to know that answer.
we would. I would like to know that too. If there's, I mean, what happens if? Because the goal is to keep it as low as possible. I mean, I'm sure they want to do that.
And probably better if they came to the meeting, they could answer.
We can certainly add them to the agenda for the June meeting.
Well, the same token, this semester they should have had some savings.
What do you mean? Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes, they should have had some savings. Yes.
On campus.
Well, I mean, they are projecting a decrease in water and sewer, but everything else is an increase. I mean, small. The custodial, grounds and parking, the insurance is the high one, 44.
But
And our portion is only 25%.
one of the things they talked about when we went through this was that new power plant is supposed to be very cost efficient. and seeing this, and then,
Right.
Duke's rates aren't going up 4%. I know that. Because I talked to Duke. They ain't going up 4%. So are they increasing their usage?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, Tri-County Tech does continue to increase in size every year that comes. And they take students from all over the state who are there for a year and then go on to Clemson University. And that group gets bigger every year.
The bridge program.
Bridge, yeah.
That we also fund. Is that right? Well, we're paying maintenance of the building. Anyway,
Okay, so you're going, Mr. Roper, you're going to send that over to them to get the specific answers of what,
What I would intend to do is I'll send that opinion here when we conclude tonight, so you'll have that to review. In my notes, I put, have Ralph call Tri-County Tech with these questions tomorrow, and then if y'all want to set up a time for them to come in, I know they have offered to do
let's just
that.
go ahead, we'll go ahead and add them to the agenda.
What, Mr. Chairman, if I may, what the real issue here is when we talked about doing this, Mr. Greeno provided us with a schedule, and it all marched out, and everything fit, and everything looked good, and yeah. That's, and I realize there's nothing definite in this world, but now we're 2 years later, and, oh, we gotta go up now, which means that schedule doesn't march out, which means we're gonna be in the same boat as we are with the road user fees in a very short amount of time. And that's what the real concern is.
well, that, we were told we wouldn't have any increases because of the savings of the consolidation. And you based your numbers on no increase.
Right.
And I asked you at the time, no increase. You said, yep, that's the information I'm given.
That's where my concern really lies. We're gonna come short before we, if they continue to tick up. Next year they go up again, the next year they go up again.
Right. All right, so we're good on that. The other question we wanted to know about the evaluation of the joint position with the school district of Pickens County in the ED office. We did discuss it at the 420 meeting, and I know that Mr. Farley had given us some information, and then you guys have got something at your desk too.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could say, the question is kind of conflated between overall design of the system, how the system works, and the history of how we got to where we are, and then also some individual personnel information. So I had suggested to Mr. Farley on receiving this question today that he write this up for you all to review, so we could avoid any of the personnel specific.
Yeah, I don't want, yeah, exactly. So, I mean,
So that's the reason you have a written report on that front.
and from what I understand, the school district has already approved moving forward because they've seen success on their end.
Yeah, the information we have from the school district is they're very happy with the way the program is going at present and would like to see it continue.
Okay.
Well, our question was about performance. He says here from a performance
But
perspective,
be careful, we don't want to talk about personnel. Right.
they've exceeded expectations, so it's positive at least.
Yeah, okay.
But if you'll remember back to what the original question was, it's not about an individual, it's about a
Is the office, is
measurables, what is the word I'm looking for? Trey, help me out.
return on investment, a measurable return on
Measurable
investment.
goals and returns. Yeah,
So, you know, you do a great job. I like you. But I can't measure that. And that was what the original conversation was.
There's some of that information included, and I know you're getting a two-page, single-space written report handed to you, so some of that information is included here. It's probably not fair, especially to have to digest that.
Okay.
it would be nice to know exactly how many kids were able to take advantage of what he's put together, which goes back
Well,
to
it's
your
got-
point of measurables. He said they had 225 county senior students receive maximum job and career opportunities.
We get down a little bit further in your, I mean, I don't know where you are, but I was looking at the where'd it go? Okay. The creation of the 47 high-skilled CNC robotic positions, investing $16.8 million in equipment. and a new plant generating approximately $2 million in property tax revenue over 20 years for the county.
I don't know if that's what he did, though. That's more what we did.
That's what he's saying.
But back to Vice Chairman Bauer's point.
Yeah. I know,
Which is
I know,
a
we're
great
dancing
question.
around, we don't want to talk personnel, so, I mean, and we don't.
But they also had a $1 million machine donated to the Career Center,
Right.
part of that.
But the question that Mr. Bowers asked, which is the right question, is that did the creation of this position, okay, no matter who's in it, that job, that position, that job, did that bring that $1 million in? How many students, because of this position, were put in the workforce? Okay?
And right
How-
now,
how
one
many-
thing-
Not stuff that we did or happened because, but that position caused. Is that kind of?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but one thing to keep in mind right now, in looking at that job fair, and, let's say, how many companies? 30 companies, 225 seniors throughout the county, all right? Right now, we don't know how many of those guys have been placed with jobs because of the current situation.
Well, we've been
I mean, that
doing
would be-
it, but we've been doing this for 2 years, so we could look at last year.
True, but one thing to keep in mind is the extenuating circumstances we're in right now, this year would be higher, or should be higher, considering a second year doing this. But right now, those numbers, in reality, they are inconclusive as far as the
Well, there
end
is a-
result. But I think right now,
There is some information on numbers when you get down to the second page, the
what
fourth
I'm
paragraph from the bottom.
that's what I'm looking at
About the
right
job
there.
fair.
The
Right,
job
right,
fair
that's why I said the
and
job fair.
opportunities. But as far as actual people getting hired, normally we hear that, or they talk about some of these people getting hired, like some of those students they sent to Germany for training. Was it last year? The year before, they sent them to Germany for training
With air
to
contact.
place them. Yes.
Yeah.
And hired 4 or whatever, how many right like that, high-paying jobs, straight out of high school.
But I get that. The question is not that they're getting them, it's who's causing it. Is this position the one causing it?
I'm sure it's like cooking. You got a lot of different degrees, a lot of moving parts.
But you know what the salt does? You know what the baking soda does? It's finding out what, we're trying to gauge, and I get the point, is it being effective? And it's just like you said, just because they're a nice guy and everything's great, doesn't mean it's being
I
effective.
agree.
So I think we're looking for a little more, at least me, having thought through this some more depth into what exactly are the measurables of the position. I mean, that's what we were looking for.
Agreed. That's kind of, yeah,
Can-
contact hours and blah, 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 and all that stuff, yeah.
Can we ask Mr. Farley to give us the measurables?
And obviously, if the school district is bought into it, and he's proven that he's done well, but you shouldn't have to every year sit here and say, okay, what has this position done?
Right.
We need to have true measurables on it.
Any other questions on that? Mr. Vice Chairman, you need to talk about Public Service Commission.
Yeah, so we talked about that very first meeting about the Public Service Commission, and we talked about painting tanks. And that's a lot of money, if I remember correctly. I don't have that figure in front of me. It's in the book somewhere, I'm sure.
It's about $500,000.
Yeah. And I said, well, didn't we just do this? And we talked about, well, we did it several years ago. And I said, well, it's been done sometime in the last 3 years because this is my third budget that I worked on.
Right.
And we talked about a company coming in and warrantying the work and this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth. So the question then was, why are we paying another $500,000 to paint tanks again?
Right. So I asked the Public Works Director to give me a report on that, and I received it just a few minutes before coming in here, so I apologize for not having this to y'all. I'll send this to y'all as well. But just as an overview, there are 2 tanks out there that are at issue, so it's very easy for me, and I'm sure it would be easy for you all, to conflate painting one tank with another tank, because there's 2 tanks. One of the tanks they've had a much better result from. They were built at the same time. But one of the tanks seems to be doing well and has held up well. It's been, it was constructed in 1999, these 2 tanks were. So that was 20 years
20
ago.
years, yeah.
20 years ago. I'm looking at the math guy. 20 years ago that was constructed. The tank number 2 is what they call it at the Public Service Commission, is the one that is doing well. It was repainted in 2012, so prior to y'all, but some 17 years into its life cycle, I guess, it was repainted, which involves draining it, using the other one, and it takes like 3 months to do this whole process. And then it was retouched in 2015. They had some worrisome spots that came up, so they retouched in 2015. And it seems to be doing well now. It'll need continued maintenance. The tanks are designed to last for 40 years, but it's contemplated that there'll be recoatings done. And the way that Matt Kelly described this to me is that he said, think about it like a car wiper blade. Okay, the coating on the inside of the tank is the wiper blade. And it's going to be, there's going to be wear and tear because there's expansion, contraction, temperature changes, caustic materials get on it. There's going to be wear and tear. There's also draining the tanks, filling the tanks up for normal maintenance. So this material is not going to be lasting for the 40 years. It's just not going to. But he said it's important to do for the operational lifespan of the utility, in the same way that changing your wiper blades helps the wiper motor, it helps the wiper arm, it helps the windshield. That's the analogy he tried to explain it to me with. But basically, tank 2 is doing relatively well. We are having a continued expense that we anticipate we'll continue having to touch up the paint. Tank 1 has been something of a maintenance nightmare, which they can't figure out since they're sitting side by side. They were constructed at the same time. So they don't know if it was an issue with the steel that was used in '99. That's the theory that they work on. But they continually have trouble with that one. It was painted in 2010, and then it was painted again, or retouched in 2015, and then they repainted it again in 2017, which is the incident you remember. So this is the tank that was painted in 2017. Okay, so it's back up now 3 years later for another process.
But we did ask for a warranty.
We did, and the issue with the warranty is the exterior warranties on these tanks is for 15 years because it's an exterior paint job. The interior warranty is for 5 years, but the warranty on the workmanship is apparently for 1 year. So I don't know how you differentiate all of those things, but that's what I'm informed here with this information.
Yeah, but the workmanship, the problem is your paint is not holding.
Well, the problem, quite honestly, from the Public Service Commission standpoint, is that the work was not supervised by a professional that would say, okay, this work's up to snuff, we're ready to proceed to the next point. So this time what they're wanting to do is have a professional supervise it.
We need to go back to the company that did it and demand that they redo it. Why would you not do that?
Or
3 years into the project, it's failing.
they're not going to redo it. I mean, we're not going to get specific performance from them of that contract. What we could do is pursue that avenue on the warranty and present to them the cost it cost for us.
Well, see, there's a possibility you have a paint breakdown, which goes back to the paint manufacturer, which they'll be liable for. Okay, so the company may not have to pony that up. But until you bring in the people that did the job and say, okay, we have a warranty issue here. We're 3 years into this thing and this thing's failed. We expect you to fix it and put some pressure on them. Then they're going to be forced to go back to the paint manufacturer and go, and then they're going to start doing some testings and they say, well, it wasn't put in right. Well, then, wait a minute, then there's a problem here. There's some negotiation stuff as opposed to let's just spend $500,000.
No, I understand what you're saying, but we also know that there's normal maintenance responsibilities on these tanks. And I'm not saying that that's 100% the cause here, but what needs to happen is we need to paint the tank. So in terms of pursuing those remedies that you're talking about, I think that's a valid thing for us to pursue. But in the meantime, we need to fix it.
Well, we can't paint the tank. The painting the tank is going to be part of the remedy, because you can't paint the tank and go back to them and go.
And I'm telling you, we will not get some company to mobilize specific performance and repaint this tank. The measured damages would be, what did it cost for us to remedy the problem? And have an expert give an opinion throughout.
Right, but if there's a problem with the paint, which they can determine, okay, there are things that we can be made partially whole. But to be under a 5-year warranty and 3 years into it and have a failure and then just say, well, we're just going to have to repaint it.
And What I'm saying is, we have to repaint it, okay?
Right, but
we
we're
risk
gonna bear the
failure.
full cost of repainting.
That's a separate question, and I
Right.
think it's a valid,
See, I think they're-
area to go into.
I think they're tied together.
Yeah.
Because of, we've got to go back, and this is the first thing I think that the commissioner, you know, the Public Works Commissioner needs to be doing, is calling them up and saying, hey, we got a failure. We need your guys here tomorrow. And then we start a conversation and try to figure out what happened.
There is some history there, and I don't want to mischaracterize the history, but I hear what you're saying. I 100% understand what you're saying. But there's some history there with the contractor and the performance in 2017. And I can get you some more information on that, but I don't want to misstate it.
Okay, well. do we
What-
need-
Well, it sounds like they're holding us hostage.
They're not holding us hostage. We need to paint the tank.
No.
All these remedies are out there.
I'm agreeing, so my car's broken down. I gotta fix my car.
Right.
Okay, but it's under warranty. Well, no, it's not, because you didn't buy the extra. Well, no, yes, I did. Well, and now it sounds like, well, there's this warranty, then there's this warranty, then this little bitty one, and this little bitty one's the one that failed, so we're not gonna cover any of it.
Right.
Well, hold on, I'm not quite sure. Is it, I mean, I see what they're saying. It sounds like, no, y'all gotta pay for the whole thing, and do we?
I just remember in 2017, they marching in there, and this is the best, this is gonna hold up, this is.
That's
gonna
right.
hold
Last
us
us for a
off,
long
This is
time.
gonna last, this is, and we're 3 years in, and nope, we gotta do it all again, boys.
And I understand what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I don't want to speak to that situation because I wasn't directly involved in that and what the representations may
And I
have
realize
been.
the public works,
That position has changed as well.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, have we contacted the contractor?
There's a history there. I don't want to mischaracterize it, okay? So I know that there was unless I'm confusing the two tanks, there was a dispute that arose as that project was concluded. But I'll get you that information.
But we haven't contacted.
I'm not saying that, Mr. Whitehurst. I'm saying that I don't want to characterize whether we did or didn't until I've gotten the facts from him on that.
One of the things
I
that,
recall a dispute that arose.
Okay,
this isn't the same contractor.
No.
Okay.
that's a
That
specific.
would have been like, Chris would have probably lost it, so.
But we were sold quite a
That
bit.
would be bad
We were sold quite a bill of materials on this.
on the last go-round.
And,
telling you, it was
and the paint being what it was, because I know we asked the specific questions about warranty,
Right.
you know, and 3 years into failure of it is, do we need to go from a legal side on this?
Well, and we may. I would just stress that where we are right now, these are valid questions and valid concerns, but where we are right now is a budget decision. We need to repaint the thing.
Correct.
one of the things that concerns me is that if we had somebody do the job and they did a sloppy job, or for some reason it didn't work out, if we go back and have the same person do the same sloppy job again, we haven't gained anything. I think we need
And that's
to-
one area, and I know what Ralph's, I think I know what he's about to say, but he could step in if I'm misstating this. That's one of the proposals they're doing this time, is to have someone who's qualified to supervise the contractor. So we're paying a little more to have someone supervise the contractor to make sure it's done properly up front.
I thought we even had that with this last.
I don't think so.
Because
thought we did too,
this is not you know, you don't hire Joe Schmo with a pickup truck to do this. This is a
A supervisor, I don't think we did. Right. Right. Right, right.
So when's the date?
the company didn't prep the tank?
When's the date that this has to be done? When's our deadline?
It needs to be done this coming budget year.
We can't do that.
I think they came in and did some, what was it, like pitting, they cleaned up the pitting.
I remember there's a whole pitting issue on it, which is a big deal.
That's right.
It's a huge deal for the pitting, because that's what destroys it. But the company that's gonna,
I'm pretty sure staff.
well, we probably drained it, but they would have prepped it. You wouldn't have a paint company come in and not do the prep work.
Right, I agree with that.
Or you have filled tank.
We drained it,
Well, we drain it. I can get us draining the tank.
pressure washed the stuff out.
Maybe
And then
that's a
they would
job
have
no
come
one
in
wanted.
and prepped for the painting.
That's what I think that happened.
Yeah,
I wasn't really involved.
we weren't doing the prepping of the pressure washing, it's not prepping it.
I don't know.
But we've
Hopefully
got
they didn't
rust to
treat it as
remove, you've got pitting to fix, if it's not prepped right, the paint ain't gonna adhere.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go
I
ahead.
was going to ask Mr. Chairman, so do we need to obviously continue with this, because I agree, we have to do something with it, but do we need to add legal costs into our budget?
Well, maybe. That's kind of where I was going. So do we, okay, we have to fix it. So for the purposes of the budget, and it's planned for without a tax increase, but is there, I'm trying to figure out a way forward. I mean, you're saying, guys, we got to do this, and we're going, okay, we got to do it, but these guys we think are responsible, so they need to pay for it.
No, I think that's.
So I'm confused as to how do you move forward on this? So you're suggesting is to approve the budget as it is, but in the meantime,
And then we
go
come
get
back
'em.
to you with reports on that. That's what I would
Can we
suggest.
get that by next meeting?
Some of the underlying facts, absolutely. But in terms of,
I wouldn't expect a resolution.
that's right.
I'm not expecting that, but how desperate are we now to paint this tank?
There's a timing issue that it needs to be painted in the summertime. That's
Yes,
an
right,
issue.
because of the pHs and stuff. You gotta
Right, so I think as soon as we know, we would start trying to move
And
forward.
what I'm understanding, what Colin Clint, we've missed it for this summer.
Right.
I think this is prepping and getting, consultant on.
That's probably good news, given your
To
concern.
prep it for next year. I think we've missed the window for this summer.
Okay,
And I may be speaking out of turn, but that's what I remember.
I would think you would, because it would
No,
be
so
very
what-
tough to do that.
What he tells me is that it is early, or late spring, early summer is the optimum time to do this.
So that would be next year.
Right.
So we have
We were
some,
originally trying to do it this year, we're gonna try to come out of council to ask for this, in the current budget, but then we said, it's getting too late, it's gone too long. Clinton came back and said, let's just, look at doing it for this time next year.
in all this time, we've never contacted the contractor?
Again, that's overstating.
Okay.
I want to get that data for you. I don't want to say something I don't.
Okay, there's obviously something here that's contractual, that's discussion. Okay.
Thank y'all, gentlemen.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
That answers my question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, it does. Then the next is a follow-up on EMS billing RFPs.
Before we get to that, I do want to throw this in because Mac wanted me to mention this, and I got in the philosophical part of this. But the tank, the replacement cost for a tank like this now, just so you know this data, is $7 million. So there is, it's not cheap.
Yeah.
Okay. The EMS billing RFPs. You want to speak to that?
I know this was brought up probably, I'd say, I don't want to say exactly, but it's been brought up over a year ago about putting this out for bid. We did put it out for bid. We received several bids in. We brought it to the Emergency Services Board to let them review it, let them come up with a recommendation. They came back and said, well, instead of us going through that and interviewing everybody, we'd prefer staff do that. And to be honest, it kind of went by the wayside. We did get a new request for proposal from the Emergency Services Director. So with everything that's going on with the COVID, I haven't sent that out yet. I've had it for a couple of weeks. And then once everything kind of gets back to normal, we can send that out for bid again. And instead of sending it through the Emergency Services Board, we can make a recommendation to the administrator on what we want to do, if we want to stay with the current company, or if we want to move to a newer company or a new company.
So I have a question. Why is, if we put these people in place for the Emergency Services Board to make these choices, why are they saying, no, we don't want to do it, let's let staff do it?
Let's just sleep.
So,
The answer to that would be, and his leg fell asleep, so that's why.
oh my goodness,
That's
don't,
why he's hobbling on. The answer to that would be that our procurement code doesn't allow it. You did not put that board in place for that.
Okay.
That's one of the concerns we had with the process up to now. One of the first questions I asked on taking over the acting administrator role, and I've got notes on this, it was either July 9th or July 12th of 2019. I asked the Emergency Services Director, where are we on the RFP for EMS billing? And his response was we were caught up in the Emergency Services Board, and they were having trouble meeting, and there was a lot of questions about that. So it went on for a while, and ultimately I directed them, it's been so long now, we need to follow our procurement code, we need to put this thing out, we need to make a decision, a recommendation to y'all. So
Okay.
that's where we stand with that.
Did y'all have, what other questions you have on that?
That answers it.
All right,
That's on both of those, right? Med control, that's on med control and EMS billing.
Med control is a different situation. Med control is also one of your questions. With med control,
Which is the next
we went
question. Go
through the
ahead.
process, and then both bids, as I understand it, Ralph, correct me on this, were well over budget, and so we couldn't move forward. It's a budgetary issue. That would be something that you all would need to address in the budget if you wanted us to be able to make that step, because once we went out to market, we found out the market had far exceeded where we were.
So if we're gonna address it, Mr. Chairman, we gotta know what to address.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So how do we, what,
I don't recall the numbers of the bids that came in for the service that y'all were, the level of service y'all were asking.
this is from the meeting you had me go to? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
And both came in,
Well above what we had
we
budgeted.
had two.
That's right.
Okay, so looking for suggestions from you guys on how we move forward on that, because you can't, how do you address it in the budget if we don't know what we're addressing?
Well, we know what the bids were for, or we know as a staff, we can get you that information, what the differential was, so you have a better idea of what the market requires now.
And what would that do to, what would that do to our budget? If, I mean,
Well, I mean, as we presented to council, it's a balanced budget, so if we want to add anything to it, theoretically, we'd have to take something away from the budget.
to keep it without a tax increase.
Right. Or reducing services in some form, cutting, not necessarily reducing services, but cutting expenditures from a department.
We will send you those numbers that you have a ballpark figure.
Okay,
Do we have an idea, like, pull out of the air? And what it covers and, you know,
That's a larger conversation. The Emergency Services Board, I do know, recommended that our medical control provide significantly more, or I'm not sure they formally voted, but the feeling in the room was that they provide significantly more services than what we've been requiring from medical control up to now. So I think there was some recognition that that needed to happen.
what falls under medical control?
We've got one member of council that could probably speak a lot more intelligently on this than me. But generally speaking, and he'll correct me if I get this wrong, it's the doctor that issues the standing orders under which the EMS operates. So it also reviews EMS performance in the extent that, and if a question arises, they're able to say whether proper procedures were followed.
okay, so now I'm, all right, now I'm
Was that even
remembering.
close?
I'm getting back to this meeting. So they gave us a price based on the recommendation of all these additional requirements from the Emergency Services Board. And so you had, Plan X and Plan Y, and they were both higher because we were already with Plan Y. I mean, we were already with the guy, we were already with.
We were with one of the bidders already, but it was Plan
But it was,
Z.
it was way less services
That's right.
than what they had requested. Am I making sense to you guys? No.
This is still this is medical stuff, which is always a little.
I'm trying to make
I
it-
keep looking to
Right.
Mr. Bowers.
Yeah, he's
to
got,
say,
I mean, I was in the room and I mean, I
guide me
get
through
it.
the weeds here.
And-
The gist of it is, in the state of South Carolina, you can't have an ambulance company, which our Pickens County EMS is an ambulance service by definition. Regulation 61.7 lays out how you gotta have it. You have to have a physician that oversees, not the day-to-day operation, but you're technically working under that physician's license. As a nurse or a respiratory therapist or a physical therapist, you are a licensed healthcare provider. As an EMT or an EMT advanced or a paramedic, you hold a certification, not a license. In order to work as a paramedic in the state of South Carolina, you actually have to work under a physician's license, which means you have to have a medical control physician in order to buy medications, your ALS, your life-saving epinephrine, lidocaine, amio, all your drugs that you carry on the ambulance. You have to have a physician sign off on that. your standing orders are the protocols that the paramedics follow to keep them from picking up the phone. Hey, I want to do this or that. Well, we can follow standing orders that have to be signed off by a doctor. And the regulation lays out what the minimal requirements are for that position. And that would be level Z, which is, we probably aren't really like that minimal, but it's very hands-off. They have a great relationship. The physician that's been doing it has been doing it a long time and has done a great job. But healthcare has changed so much in the last 5-10 years that it actually, more involvement of physicians is not uncommon and welcomed, if you will, which is kind of what sparked some of this conversation, whether it be training, whether it be protocols, doing more. They do some pretty cool things, but there's like, they gave blood on the scene. They transfused the patient at Laurel and Hardy during the tornadoes. That's something you wouldn't have done a year ago.
Technology, way different. When I sat in and listened to like one of them that gave their presentation, the whole time I'm thinking, if I have a stroke or if I have a heart attack or something, God forbid, happens in my family, boy, I want all those tools that you're talking about, rather than be, let's just send an ambulance and hope you get there okay. I mean, it's not that bad, but
No, it's really
No,
not.
so-
And the
right.
reason for the whole conversation is it's kind of stepping up the game, taking
Right.
it to the next level, offering the best service available for the residents of Pickens County. Doesn't matter who the vendor we go with, it's really setting the goal. And if we, after those conversations and after we interviewed the two candidates, if you will, that put in bids, it started getting down in the weeds of, okay, what exactly do you expect the day-to-day to look like? And that's when the Emergency Services Board and Chairman Coster and myself, we kind of dipped out and said, this is kind of the direction we would like to see it go. But as far as getting down in the weeds of how many hours do you expect to see the face of a doctor, how many hours do you expect them to do in training or QA, QI, that's all for staff to handle. And that's where we left it. But they couldn't give accurate, no one could give accurate quotes on what it would actually cost until they knew exactly what it was we wanted. So it kind of is an a la carte, because you do have the minimal, but then you can add, and you can add this and that, and this and that, and depending on, so the final price, I really have no idea.
Is there a price break between every letter up you go? Like, I'm assuming Z would be the bottom, and there would be
That's the shorthand we're using, right?
Yeah.
It's not.
But if you said it, okay, whatever it was, say
Z
it
or-
was level
No,
D.
no.
Is there a specific, at level D, you have this,
So
this?
the way, and I can tell you the way that most places do it, because actually, I just know, they charge by hour. So they figure you're gonna want a doctor for X number of hours a month, it's gonna cost you X number of dollars a month.
But you got no way of knowing that.
Huh?
You got no way of
Actually,
knowing.
you do, because you sit down and they have a formula to figure out, well, if you're expecting us to do 4 hours of training for your staff a month, you want us to come in once a quarter for 4 hours, which is a good thing. And there's certain things that require the physician to do or should be done by the physician versus just watching a video or something like that. Or you want to go to the cadaver lab, or you want to go to, you know what I'm saying, those kinds of things. Or is it just simply you run 15,000 calls a year, you want us to look at 20% of them or 10% of them, you figure it takes this long to look at this one call, multiply that out. So you do know, you really do know how many hours you're asking for. And but what I understand, one of the vendors actually sat down and came up with that, and then actually allowed us to use the same template to look at it from the other side.
That's right.
So that you were comparing apples to apples, because currently, looking at what we're currently doing to looking at what you're potentially going to, you're looking at apples, bananas, pears, and peaches.
That's right.
And so we're able to get it to apples across the board. And that's where we left it, because it's got into day-to-day, and that's when we kind
That's
of
when we got
ducked
out.
Okay, so we're kind of at a crossroads. They're looking for direction, and we're looking
And
for
we're
answers.
looking to know what are we talking.
So I think what has to happen is that you guys have to get back in to give them direction as to what level we're looking at.
I actually think that work has been done, and I wasn't in the room when this happened. This is what I've pieced together in the months since. But I think the Emergency Services Board did some good work in talking about this is a step forward for our emergency services. This is the level of service we would like. And they came up with, some expectations beyond what we would have done 20 years ago as a rural county starting out. That's really the standard of care that we were talking about. The doctor was meeting that standard to care, adequately, perfectly good.
And I do want to say that the doc that has been covering us for many years has done everything that's been asked
Right,
of him.
right, he's done a great job.
Do we hire a doctor or do we hire a company?
Currently, we contract with a physician. Actually, I guess it's two physicians because you have a secondary as well.
You do.
So we actually are
But one of the options.
hiring an individual, not a company, to provide this service.
well,
We
there's
budgeted,
options.
and just so that you've got some data, Ralph checked this for us. We had budgeted for medical control $21,000. Both bids were significantly more. One was more than double that. So we couldn't move forward really with that at the time. But do see and do think it's a good idea, because this is not a rural county anymore. This is not 1990. This is 2020. We need to think about those expectations, and the Emergency Services Board, I think, gave clear preference on the level of care that we should expect.
Right.
We can move forward with that. We just need the budgetary flexibility to do it.
So we're looking at another $20,000 or $30,000?
That's right.
I know how to say that, but
Well, that's like nothing, right?
you all aren't gonna like it, but anyway, go ahead.
I already know what you're gonna say.
It would pave 8 inches of road.
But I think if you look at what if we're level, and this is where we rely on, Vice Chairman Bowers' expertise, is if it costs $20,000 more, are we getting enough value that we think it's worth that much more? Because in a budget this large, we can find $20,000, but it's not the $20,000. It's, are we getting $20,000 worth of value?
The return on investment, yeah.
Yeah, that can say that, first off, that we need to upgrade our service at this level because of what's going on. And is that, and that's where I have to defer to somebody that knows more.
I'm certainly not an expert in the field. I'm not even completely informed in the field, but I can tell you it would be a sea change in the level of service we're getting. It would be a significant difference in what our EMS is receiving in the way of guidance, training, oversight from what we've been getting. So in terms of, and this is, again, my uninformed opinion, this would be money well spent if you can find it in the budget.
Well, what I would say is to task that gentleman there to look at it, review at it, and give us his professional opinion, because I would consider that an expert witness in this, and give us a point of what he thinks. And,
Right,
and then-
respectfully,
and
I would
then
say-
we'll find the money.
Right, respectfully, I would say, and he may need to review it to refresh himself, but I believe he's already done this work. I believe he's already done that work.
Then will you look at the bids and look at and say, okay, well, here's, if it's your industry. I don't know hell, I don't know what the thing was.
No, but I will say that, I mean, I really do appreciate you inviting me into that meeting to hear, because it made a lot of sense to me listening to them and the services that they would provide. It wasn't just training, it was a whole lot of other things. It was like I said, it was the tools that they had at their, had access to, that we don't have access to now, we're not using now. We don't have those types of tools. So it was taking the level of care up a notch for both parties. I mean, both people were going, yes, we can do this and we can do this, but that's not currently what you're paying for.
Right. And it was really eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people that, I hate to say, sometimes you get stuck in the rut doing what you've done because you've always done it. I mean, and on both sides, and I think that was very evident that it was recognized real quick that that's the reason why it doesn't matter which bid you were to go with. If you want to increase the services, it's going to cost you more money because there's more expected.
How long have we been at this level of where we are, the services that we have? In other words, paying what is it, 20, what we pay now, or 50?
21 was a budgeted amount. I don't
So
know, I'm assuming that's come up through the years, but in terms of just that general level,
As far as that level of service,
I would say it's been from the outset.
And it used to be $1 a call is the way they used to charge for them.
$1 call.
That's how, When I think back, it was $1 a call is what Macon used to make.
Interesting.
So wait, what are we instructing them to do as far as the budgetary process?
Well, I think we do need to look and see, and I think it's fair for everybody to look and see exactly what kind of money we're talking about. By the same token, what level. I'm curious as to what staff's recommendation is after reviewing, you know. I am curious, but I do think seeing those monetary figures with what goes with them, not just saying this was bid A, this is bid B. This is bid A and this is what you get, and this is bid B and this is what you get, so that you can really see what your best bang for your buck is.
How quickly can we get that?
I don't think there's a problem getting that. I think that's all in, is that the phrase, in the hopper? Is that what that means? I think we've got that in our back pocket. I think we just need to find the money to pay for it, because this is one of the unintended consequences of the kind of flat budget instruction.
Yep,
so nobody really intended that to be one thing that fell by the wayside, because we knew going in that we needed to increase that budget if we wanted to meet this expectation of care, this standard of care.
We can put a car out somewhere or something.
Yeah, got some ideas maybe.
Had some money left over after that.
But what we'll do is we'll come up with some proposals for how we might fund it if you decided you wanted to.
Okay.
That's a good discussion.
And I'm glad this question is on here, because I'm very curious about this. When the detention center was built, and there was a point of contention about the small church and moving it because that was important. And I still maintain that the church is not a building, the church is the people. And our sheriff told us that they were going to be able to have services there, that everything would operate the way that it would continue to operate that it was. And since then, I've spoke to Reverend Moss, who says he's not allowed to go in there. Is there support ministry at the detention center, and what would the cost be to do that?
Question as asked is slightly different.
Oh, different. Yeah, actually, I'm adding that.
Right. So no, that's fine. And I appreciate the question. I can tell you that Reverend Moss continues to do the work that Reverend Moss has been called to do, and I know two small examples of that. One was at Christmas time, he brought 300 stamps, 300 envelopes,
Yeah,
300
I knew that. Yeah.
Cards for people to mail home to their family.
Right.
He brought them to me, and I took them to the jail. And then here at Mother's Day, he brought 300 cards, Mother's Day cards, 300 stamps, 300. His heart is still in this, and his heart is his heart for this ministry, I can use that word, is impressive.
If we take the personnel part of it out of it, I'm just saying, is the ministry still continuing at the detention center?
There are those types of meetings happening. We're informed by the sheriff. I don't know who runs them, but those are ongoing in the jail now. The question that I was curious about, though, is because, and I've talked to Reverend Moss. We've gone to lunch a couple times and talked about it. Have met up here as recently as, I guess, last week to talk about how we both think there's an opportunity at the stockade. And he's trying to look at what that legal entity would be on his side, and is going to bring us a proposal at some point, but we have no idea.
Right, so we've pretty much left it in his.
That's right, he's wanting to continue the conversation and continue working that way.
He's looking for grants right now.
Yeah.
I think what he's looking from us is use of the building.
Well, so what I committed to him that I felt like I could commit, based on my understanding of you gentlemen's desires, is that we would not make any other further use of the building until he had time to put together whether it was viable.
Right. I think the virus has obviously slowed a lot of that down, but his initial idea was that he just needed to place a physical location, and then they would be more self-sustaining with grants and programs and other ministries. A lot of churches. What he did out of the prison, it was all from volunteers from churches.
That's right.
Never has he ever made a nickel or been paid a nickel out there.
Right.
It was always getting these churches, and sadly, most of them were outside of Pickens County.
Right.
That were willing to come in there, and so, but those same groups would be able to work in this situation there.
And I don't want to put words in his mouth, because he's developing this, but the things that we've talked about that was exciting to me is could he operate something there that was a bridge?
Right.
a bridge from
Right.
prison population to back into the community. That's where he really feels called to go, and I think it's exciting to give him that opportunity to develop that program.
Well, I think one of the things he wanted to do was get the farm going back out there again.
Right.
Because for years, they grew crops out there.
Right.
You know, and sustained themselves in a lot of ways.
Gentlemen, do you know, and this, I may need to ask forgiveness for this because I'm not sure that I actually had the authority to do this. We renamed that road.
Yes.
I did.
It was Prison Camp Road, and once there was no prison camp out there, we have the animal shelter out there, we have several offices out there. We renamed it County Farm Road with the eye towards one day maybe we would be able to make some use of it that way.
Right.
Okay.
Well, that's, Mr. Chairman, the reason I even asked the question the way I did was, the bridge program that he discussed is actually, we heard about it in Charlotte at the summit we went to with Trump.
Right.
And I was really excited about what I heard up there, and even more excited when we came home and we heard it from Reverend Moss, and I'm like, yeah, no, this is awesome, this is good stuff, and I do feel like there's a need for that. I said that night, and the last thing I want is to be tied up when we're talking budgets, is for him to come back in 3 months and need something that we can't do because we didn't plan for it. And I understand, I know, I spoke with him, it was before Mother's Day, because I was trying to help him with that a little bit. Anyway, and one of the folks helping has had some family issues and the virus and slowed him down and this, that, and the other, and I get that and I understand that, but I don't want us to mothball it, and I don't want us to not account for it. While I don't necessarily think we'll have a ton of money tied up and running the place, because I don't think that's the vision or dream, I just don't want to paint us or him in a corner. And that's kind of the reason I want to bring this up now when we're discussing the budget. If that makes sense. But it sounds like we don't have any idea, so.
And we can continue to research it. You know, I continue to talk to him. We are kind of in the stance of waiting for, you know, what he wants to propose. But we can continue to research and bring you back more information.
But the statistics have proved if you can't help and bridge, they're going to end up right back. And
Right.
so we're going to pay for it one way or the other.
Yeah, we'll never forget the day that the detention center opened, one guy got out.
While we were
You
doing that,
pointed it out to me. He said, see that guy right there? He's going home or going somewhere. And he was walking down the
But
road.
just his fault, yeah.
during the press, yeah, he came
Right.
out with cameras on him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Well. Okay, the other question is, what about the amount required to pay on an indigent medical fund if we create our own local trust?
So I know the statute there
Yeah.
is a formula, and there's a formula, there's a base, and there's a formula, and it's broken up by population, and if I understood it correctly, and this is more your wheelhouse than mine, if I understand it correctly, we've got to pay something regardless. But then a portion of it, we could keep to put in our own trust if we decided to pass that ordinance.
That's right. And we've had either first or second reading on that ordinance.
Correct.
We've had
Second.
first, we had second, yeah, that's right.
Second. So the question is, Ralph, do you know how much that is? Because I know it's in this book somewhere and I just could not find it.
195,000 is what we have budgeted to pay to the state.
195? Do we know how much of that 195 we have to pay?
The way this statute is written, and I can send this language out to you just to verify, but this, based on my memory when we talked about this before, the way the statute is written is whatever contribution you put into the trust is deducted from your contribution to the state. So it's not in the way I remember it.
So if we put 195,000 into it,
Then it's deducted from the amount that we.
But I will tell you that keep in mind that we are going to be blazing a trail from talking with the state officials. No one has ever done this. So we would be taking a step out there, which I get excited about. But nevertheless, it would be an innovation, and I would recommend that we start with a finite program that we want to.
I remember we went, I'd forgotten about it, but we talked about that. We were going down that trail.
We used up a little bit, just trying to gather more information. I've had conversations, and I know Mr. Roper's had conversations, and that's kind of the reason for the stall out. And then there was once we pay it quarterly or we pay it monthly.
Well, in the past, to be honest, we paid it in advance, just simply that way, but technically we only have to pay it quarterly.
Okay, so the real question, if it's something we want to look at doing, we need to not pay it all in advance and determine where we're at in the quarterly process to keep as much at home.
The money, and Ralph can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the money's, it's in the budget. So it's there, we don't have to worry about that part of it.
It's just how it's allocated.
It's just how we allocate it.
Can we just direct you guys to pay it quarterly?
Sounds like that's the way you're going with that.
So that y'all can study
But-
what this trust would look like, because there
I'd
have
like
to
to
be
hang on to
trustees
as much
and
money goes to
everything.
the state as possible. I'm
Correct.
surprised you pay it one big lump sum.
Well, he knows he's gonna have to. Get it over with. Yeah, okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask, and I guess part of this, and we'll fit into budget by saying, if this is something we're gonna reallocate in the budget to our own trust versus the state's, I do ask that we continue the conversations on the trust.
Oh, yeah, I mean, but, so this, it doesn't require us to do anything different in the budget, though,
I
does
don't
it?
think it would. I think the third reading of the ordinance would take care of that.
Right,
Well, but that actually is my question. So this is the way I envision it. You don't want to put the cart before the horse. You don't count your eggs before they hatch. So you
Think
set
of
your
another one.
trust up. That's going to take a little bit of time. I don't want to get in trouble with the state, but we're going to have to pass the third in order to set the trust up. So you can't say that the third is going to actually lock the money in to stay local. You'll have to allocate that money where you're going to this is going to the state, whether it's a quarter's worth just to make sure we float the first quarter and we stay in compliance, and then everything else. You see what I'm saying?
No, I do.
Because if you dump $195,000 in on a brand new trust that they don't really know what their vision or intent is, you're asking for trouble.
But I think it's an interesting concept, and I would love, I have loved it in the past year when we can say Pickens County is a step ahead.
So we would be taking those funds and using it and paying it out here.
We
to
actually
engineer.
would not. We would develop a trust, and we would appoint members to that trust, and then we step away. Our hands are totally off. And we would literally give that trust this 195 or whatever we determine to give them. Now, they have to use it. There's a law that says, there's a statute that lays out how it can be used. And they would have to stay within the confines of that law to use that money. But we would have no authority or power to tell them what to
The
do.
ordinance as it exists right now has a 3-person trust
But it's
or
out,
body.
but right now you got Columbia's doing whatever the heck they want to.
That's correct. You
the,
actually
the
can't
difference
trace.
is you've got somebody in Columbia making decisions, and we would have people in Pickens County making
And
decisions.
the money would stay in Pickens
Correct.
County. Is the money supposedly supposed to come
The
back? to
theory
Pickens?
is the money that comes in goes back out to that community, but
Well, I don't buy
they,
that. I don't believe anything the state says. I would much rather have a trust if I knew, yeah.
So I'm back to what do we need to, specifically, do we need to do in the budget to make sure, the money's there, we're not asking for any additional money, so it doesn't change the amount. What I want to know is, what do we as a group, if we decide this is the direction we want to go to develop this trust, what do we need to do as far as the budgetary process is concerned?
and again, I don't think you need to do anything because the money's allocated. I think if you decide to go down this road, you create the trust, perhaps we could put some language in that third reading of the ordinance that says this is when we're gonna ramp it up. This is what payment would go when.
So once we do the third.
But I would
reading-
recommend that we start modest,
Okay, so,
because I
so
would anticipate there'll be some issues.
doing the third reading creates the organizational, the theory of organization.
That's
Then
right.
we task that to you at that point to create a group like a 501c3. You're gonna have to come up with a.
I think that would be an appointment y'all would make.
I'm not talking about appointment, I'm talking about the structure.
Sure,
We're gonna
yes.
have this many people, these are the bylaws, here's.
Which is what we did with the 501c3s.
Right,
It'd
so
be
it'd be
similar
the
to that
same type
process.
of thing, well, once we pass the ordinance, then basically it falls into your lap to set the structure of it.
Right.
We can kind of give you how many person on the board, but more bylaws and how it has to get spent and some rules and regulations. And then we can appoint the board, and at that point, we can start directing money into it.
That's right.
So all we gotta do is do the third reading.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So does that have to happen before we vote on the budget?
No,
That's what I'm getting at.
yeah, my whole thing is just allocation of funds. I wanted to make sure that, because I thought I don't want to give it all away.
But directing him to do by
That
quarter
was the
gives
thing,
us the
right there,
opportunity to look
do
at
it
that.
quarterly, yeah.
Right.
Okay. We were talking about leasing versus buying some vehicle, police cars, et cetera. Have we looked any further into that?
Ralph, do you have any information?
I'll give you a little overview. I've met with company several times over the years. I've seen them at state organizations that I go to for conferences. Me, from a finance director standpoint, I'm not an advocate of leasing stuff. I'm really not. I think you should pay cash. I think it helps for your organizations that don't have cash to pay for it, or another way of funding it. Basically, what they're doing is they're saying, we can't buy the car any cheaper than what you're buying for it through state contract, but what we can do is have you turn that vehicle in within 3 years, 5 years, whatever the limit they set, and we can get a higher resale value by going out to market. We have a better market than y'all would have going through, say, gov deals. So we have a better market of getting resale value on those vehicles that lower your lease cost. But the way we handle it, we hold on to cars for a long time. So I don't think it's really something that would benefit us. And I've looked over it at the years, but philosophically, when I can, I like to pay cash. And I think that's what we've tried to do over the years. But it can be a good program. There's some governments out there that are using that type program where they lease a lot of stuff. But I know the way we hold on to stuff, I think we'd prefer to dictate when we're going to turn something in versus a company saying your lease is up, now you get a new car, but you're never going to be done with that payment. You will always have that payment endlessly unless you can afford to get out of it and start paying cash again.
Mr. Chairman, the only reason I even brought it up was I think about the sheriff's office in particular, because it's no secret they go through cars and they put miles on cars because that's what they do, right? They drive around this county keeping us all safe. Also know what cars sell for on gov deals, and like you said, you can typically sell them for higher value at other places that we may not be able to do that. And that was actually the department in particular that I was thinking about. I don't know that they've even had their first Explorers come up to try to sell yet, because they're so new. But that was really the reason I was asking, was trying to figure a regular replacement plan and then be able to capitalize on resell at the end, if that makes sense. And that's the reason I asked the question.
I got a question.
I agree with you on not paying.
Let us control.
Yeah.
All right, and how much would the county have invested? Say, for example, you lease a car, every 3 years, 5 years, you got to turn in, and then we keep a car for 7 or 8 years, whatever, or how many years. What does that lease car cost? What's the cost of that lease car over that time period versus that car we pay cash for over that time period?
I could go back and go see if I've got my files on that, but when you really look at it, and I know they can sell very well. It sounded very good at the conference. One organization that got up there in print, in public and presented, but really in the end, you're paying finance charges. They're going to get you on the back end with finance charges. That's all a lease is.
So it's basically what you're saying is just cheaper to buy.
I believe it is, and you hold on to it as long as you want. Some people drive a 15-year-old car that's got 250,000 miles on it, and they're done with it after 4 or 5 years after they paid off the loan, but it's theirs to keep. You don't have to turn it back in as you do with a lease.
I had a buddy of mine that was involved in leasing on the finance side, and there are all sorts of hidden interest rates built into those leases. And you do get screwed on the back end on what, and especially if you start putting high mileage on a car, if you can pay cash, you get the best price up front because you can pay cash.
Right.
Dealerships love to lease cars because they make a lot of money on a lease car.
Well, it's kind of like copiers too. We've looked at copiers, but really, we keep our copiers generally 10 years, whereas a lease, they're going to want you to turn it in 3 to 5 years, and you never get out of that. So you think about what you would have paid for, in essence, the same cost, but you get to keep it 10 years if you pay cash versus 3 to 5 years if you lease it. So we try to hold on to stuff and try to, use vehicle maintenance to manage our fleet and keep them in good shape and keep them on the road and everything.
It's a good question, though.
Well, I do.
Because it's a conversation to have.
And I'll tell you, this is the exact scenario. I don't know if it was last year or before, we were talking about mileage on pursuit vehicles. Not talking about detectives, not talking about office staff, talking about the guys in the road, right? And something about, I don't know why 110 is what sticks out in my head, but anything over that, they didn't like it to be, even though they had cars with higher. And then I get to thinking about what I see them reselling for, and it's pennies on the dollar. And I guess my big question is, ultimately, is there a better way to sell those vehicles than what we're currently using so that we can actually get a little more on the back end?
Well, how we used to do that is we used to, on a Saturday in the fall, we'd go down to vehicle maintenance and line up all the cars and everything. And it was mainly just local people that would come in and buy them for a couple $100s. With all our equipment now that we sell, we go to gov deals, and we've been doing that for several years. So you get a lot more market for people to come and look at what you're actually selling, especially on our heavy equipment. I mean, we went to gov deals several years ago, I'd say 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and we get a lot of interest. Generally, no one locally ever buys it. It's always companies out in California, up north, locally here, and we get a lot more money on it versus having one or two people that really has a market for heavy equipment. I'm talking about a skid loader or something like that only they really want it, and then what they do is buy it real cheap because no one shows up to buy it, and then they resell it to somebody else. Right. We're kind of cutting out, in a way, the middle person, and getting a lot more money on our return when it comes to that. So as long as we keep the vehicles, yeah, we don't get a lot off of those when we sell the Crown Vics and everything. We get anywhere from probably $1,200 to $2,000 on the Crown Vics. I don't know that we've sold any of the SUV types yet. So.
But the amount of depreciation the first few years of a car is so much greater. And that's one of the reasons when you buy it and keep it a long time, your depreciation drops down pretty quickly. And so you aren't losing value very much toward the end.
Right, and then that way we control the amount of work that we put in with vehicle maintenance, and we control the upkeep on it when we buy it. And they had different options too, whether they wanted to figure in the price, the maintenance costs, they would do so much the first year. And then they had another one where they said basically it's on y'all to keep up the maintenance, and that really deflates any type of return that you possibly could have had. But I'm just, in anything, I'm not a big advocate of using leases or anything.
All right, cool.
Someone wants to think about.
Yeah.
Get the best bang out of the buck at the end.
Are you saying that Ralph's not frugal?
I'm not saying that at all.
What?
I'm not saying that at all.
I'm just kidding, Ralph.
I bet on Ralph more than anybody in here, probably.
All right, are there any other questions that you guys had that you wanted to ask with regards to the budget before I've got a final question to ask you guys?
I do.
Yes.
I want to talk about Pickens Alliance. Our funds for Upstate Alliance, usually we break those out every year. I can't find them.
Upstate Alliance.
That we pay to Upstate Alliance to be a member. The $50,000 we pay to Upstate Alliance to be a member. I don't see it in the budget. Usually it's an item that is broken out.
And I'll tell you the reason why it's going to move. It's on page 110.
So,
and I'll come back to that.
110?
Page 110.
And I'll explain why it's been moved out of the Pickens Alliance Fund. If you remember 1 year, and council will have to remember me too, but there was an issue about not paying it. We didn't put it in the budget. So because there were some questions among council members whether we should pay it or we shouldn't pay it. So I think it was last year we didn't put it in the budget originally, so council could have the discussion, should we fund this? We've had it for a couple of years. What's our return on investment? Council had that discussion, and what council decided is that we could use the money from the Commerce Park Fund, which is money that we get back whenever a new company comes in and we've invested in them. We take that cash out, or we take that money from their property taxes and put it into a fund for future development of economic development.
we decided that last year.
It was in 2020's budget that you decided that.
So we took it out of our,
We didn't recommend it in 2020. because the year before it was a discussion, and the administrator said at the time that he would not put it in the budget, so it could be a discussion among council members, because those are either one or two, wasn't.
I think it was in the budget and we
No,
just.
no, it was not in the budget. We had
Was
to
not
add
in-
to it.
Okay, we added to that budget.
Right, we came back and added, council wanted us to find money, and I think it was looked at in our ordinance for the park, Commerce Park Fund, that we could use that money, so council voted to add it back to the budget using the Commerce Park
So
Fund.
this year you kept it in that same, because that's where it came from last year.
Correct, yeah, and that's on page 110, if you look in the 2020 budget, it's got 58.5, in the 2021 budget, it's got the 58.5 in there.
All right, well, I have to voice my opinion on this,
I know.
and y'all get to hear me. First of all, I think it needs to be as part of Pickens Alliance budget, okay? Because it is part of Pickens Alliance, it's Upstate Alliance. We've been in 4 years now, over $200,000. Any of the jobs we have were not brought by Upstate Alliance. None of the companies that we have here have been brought by Upstate Alliance. I've never felt like it's been, we pay the highest amount of any county. We pay the same amount Greenville County does. It's per capita, but they cap it right at our population level.
Correct.
Funny, so we get to pay the same amount as Greenville County does, more than Oconee County, but I have not yet to see, and I know Carl and I have talked back and forth on this, and once again, we're in the same boat. We've spent over $200,000 over 4 years. I would like to make a motion to remove it from the budget. If anyone wants to have a discussion about it.
Okay. So there's a motion we can't do that. We have to do that
work
in the-
session. We're only in a work session.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, it can only be done at third
Then I
reading.
don't make a motion. I'd like to discuss it then.
Discuss on, all right, so okay, what do you guys, comments, questions, sarcastic remarks?
I have plenty of sarcastic remarks, nothing to do with this.
Well, I think we should be part of it. It's kind of like being part of a fraternity. If you're not part of the fraternity, you don't get to go to some of the dances. And so I feel like we should be part of it in just about all the other counties. In fact, one year, there was only one other county that wasn't part of the Upstate Alliance or the Alliance for their different part of the state.
And they're part of their state.
I do believe that, and I said this last year, I don't necessarily like the layout at all. I don't necessarily like the funding mechanism at all. I agree with Councilman Whitehurst on that. I, however, do feel like it is a tool in the toolbox. And I said last year, and this isn't an attack on anyone, I said last year, if we're not using the tools in our toolbox, that's shame on us. And to be realistic, it's not Upstate Alliance's job to bring us a single business to our county. Their job is to give us the tools we need to be able to bring the businesses to our county, to do a lot of the grunt work that has to be done. We're supposed to utilize them for that. And whether or not we are, I cannot answer that question. Those were the kind of measurables I wanted to see last year. So I do think that it is a vital organization for us to be a part of. I do agree that I don't like the funding structure, like I said, but ultimately, it is a tool in the toolbox that if we're not using, shame on us. And we may not be, but to have realistic expectations that they're not going to bring us a single business, that's not their role or job. Just like the Department of Commerce, unless you've worked some deal, they're not going to say, company XYZ, you're going to Pickens County. We have to work that relationship and leverage things from the Department of Commerce so that we get things, company XYZ here. They're not just going to pick up the phone and say, you're getting company XYZ.
So I'm going to agree with you on everything that you said, except I want to side with you on another point. I think it needs to be an Alliance Pickens budget so that they understand that is the tool in their toolbox. We have allocated it to that department, And that's where they need to be using that as a tool in their toolbox. Otherwise, it's just sitting out somewhere else. And I understand what you're saying, Ms. Greeno, that you were using it as a funding mechanism, and
Well,
that's why it showed up where it shows up.
Yeah, the ordinance calls for it to be put into a separate fund and use that money for economic development. Where it had been paid for in the past is in Pickens Alliance, but all Pickens Alliance is, because it's a separate entity in one sense, and in another sense it's not. We have to put in a separate fund, but the general fund pays 100% of economic development outside of what the 501c3 raises. So the reason why we took it out of Pickens Alliance is because all that money comes from the general fund.
Well, but here's in the past, the way it worked, and I don't mean to interrupt.
No, please.
Is that, you know, Ray had a budget.
Right.
You know, and when we left, we were in Pickens, our Upstate Alliance, when I first came on board. We went through 4 years, I guess we were in, and we had this multiple discussion, and what are we getting out of it? And we said, well, could you use that $50,000 better than going to Upstate Alliance and using it for our own recruiting purposes? And he said yes.
And that was before we got here.
Before we
came on board.
So what happened is he said yes. If I had to pick, because it was in his budget, then he would take the $50,000. And then he went out, and I think we had like 3 or 4 businesses that came out of that. That German company now came from him going to Germany on that money. Okay. Now it's not part of his budget. So of course he's going to want it, because if you don't have to pay for it, it's not part of your budget. He's not left with that decision as to how to allocate resources, because he's got his cake and can eat it too.
It's an interesting question.
So my question still goes back to, to Mr. Bauer's point, is that if it's a tool in our toolbox, what is the tool? What are they providing to us for $50,000 a year, as opposed to being a member of the club, which is great, but I don't see the
Mr.
return.
Mr. Farley has already applied for 2 grants. I think they're $6,000 apiece to get a presentation set up using one of the little aircraft that you go over and take pictures with. Drones, yeah. He has applied for $6,000 each for 2 presentations to be done for him of the property that's left at the industrial park. One of them will be for that, and there's a building in Easley that they're trying to develop. And those with those drones and the pictures will have information written with them. And so all Mr. Farley has to do is send that to prospective client who can look at that, and if they're interested, then they get in contact with him and they come and see him.
So I think you bring up a good point in that we're not really, you just made me think of this. I know U.S. Frozen Waffle was able to get money as part of economic development because we were part of the Upstate Alliance. So it didn't come back to.
Do we know that? Do we know that?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things they talked about. You know, we check. I mean, I hope I didn't just make that up. I'm not trying to make
money from the state.
Because of in other words, because of our relationship, because we're part of Upstate Alliance, they were able to use that as leverage to get that money from the state where the county didn't have to come up with it. But we don't have a list of those things of here's what our relationship has been able to do, other than go, no, it's really been great. We just keep hearing it's really great. And since we've been here, before you got here, you heard that, no, I can do it myself. So it was kind of contradictory. But is that a word? But I do have a question. So you mentioned, because you're right, Upstate Alliance, Pickens Alliance is a 501c3. They raise money?
To my knowledge, yes.
Thank you. You know,
do we know? I mean,
do you know that used to be companies?
I don't even know anything about it, how much money they raise. I haven't.
They are a separate 501c3, but from a financial standpoint, we're responsible for them.
There's 2 sides of Alliance Pickens. You have the county side.
Right.
Right, and the 501c3.
And that's the advisory board and all that. Then you have a 501c3 side, because there are things that, like drone footage, or Mr. Farley's car comes out of the 501c3 money. We do the maintenance and upkeep on it, but the actual purchase of the car comes out of 501c3 money.
So they're saving the taxpayers'
But
money
let
by.
me ask you a question. Where's that money from 501c3 come from?
It
As
comes
far
from,
as I know, donations from whoever businesses or, they're separate books from ours.
Right.
We have to
Some of
reconcile
the-
at the end of the year and
the
put it on our books, but I don't have the details of
Used
how
to
they
be
raise that money.
Companies paid money to be part of that and contributed to that.
I believe you're correct.
And I
I
think
think
the power
county
companies-
pays that now.
No,
I think the power companies do a pretty good contribution to them.
They may. I'd like to know,
Well, you would know that it would be in the budget. Does the county pay
For what?
into the 501c3?
is there anything the county that goes into the 501c3, or any funds that
They
go
raise their
from the-
money separately.
Is there money that comes from the county part that gets transferred in there from them into the 501c3? Any payment for like his salary? I mean, I'm just questioning, is there anything goes between those two?
No, they're separate, and, you know, what they raise, at the end of the year, we have to put on our books because it's a special component unit, and I don't want to get into GASB and everything,
Do we
but,
know how much is on there now?
pardon me?
How much is in there now?
I don't have that right off. I wouldn't be able to tell from the budget how much is, how much money, because, you know, they write the checks and everything, or sometimes we'll write a check and they reimburse us. We set it up as a receivable. One example is the director's cell phone bill. So we'll pay that through payroll, but then we charge it to a receivable, and then they cut us a check periodically to reimburse us for that.
will
That's
say-
more of an
and
accounting
I
thing.
don't remember the
But it's-
number. I really don't remember the number, but I did look at it, and like the last several months, it was cell phone bill, reimbursement, and like Castle and Hendricks, who does their accounting. Seems like the county cut a check and then they turn around and reimburse the county. All of their money's out, with the exception of 2 or 3 items, which were small, was for things like cell phones.
So it's pretty small stuff.
It is.
So I guess, but you bring up a good point.
And like they voted to work on a couple projects like the drone project and this, that, and the other, and that money will actually flow through the 501c3 side instead of the other side, if I'm not mistaken. But like the power team was working on a match for another project, and this, that, and the other. So all that happens on the 501c3 side, not on the Alliance Pickens side.
To me, it's kind of like, we're not waiting by the phone for Secretary Hitt to call and say, hey,
No.
I got you
know,
something.
I know it doesn't
Yeah.
work that way.
Yeah.
I know very well it
But-
doesn't work that way. But if you can tell me, like you're saying, if the US Waffle got funds.
Because we're a
there,
part of that.
Then that's a justification, okay?
That's-
But I haven't seen, if you're saying they got a grant, but did the grant, is it something we could apply it on our own? Or because it's through them? You know, which to me is, you know, they're kind of a funnel for government money, but that's like GPATs, but I don't think it works the same way. But I'm looking for some justification that really says, yeah, because we're a member here, this much money was able to support these businesses. And if we weren't a member, that wouldn't be, but just because you get money from the state doesn't mean you had to be a member of Upstate Alliance to get it.
Right. Councilman Hendricks.
One thing I'd like to look at is where we were economically in development prior to joining that in 2017 and where we're at now. We've grown leaps and bounds the last few years with economic development. And I think that is an integral part of our development in the last few years, is having that tool to use. And considering what we've brought in, that's a drop in the bucket for what we got brought
Well,
in.
I guess my point would be, we had a lot of economic development right up that we came in before this council came on board, okay? That was the German company, for example. No, we've had economic since you've been on board. What I'm trying to figure out, is it because of Upstate Alliance or not? Or how much contribution were they? Was it $50,000 a year? Was it $200,000 over 4 years that we can justify? I'm just looking to know, what's our return on our investment?
Yeah.
We want measurables.
Measurables. We had 3 big companies come in right there in 2016.
I just remember when we did the press conference for US Frozen Waffle, and I hope I didn't dream this, but I really believed that they said it's a good thing we were part of Upstate Alliance because that enabled us to get this funding.
And that may be,
But to everyone's points, we're not really getting, hey, here's the results of what we've been doing, not just the tools that being able to use it for grant writing service, but because of our relationship, these things happen.
and it's the same thing we look for measurables,
Yeah.
and that's all I'm asking.
Mr. Chairman, may I say, I want to, and I'm assuming Mr. Rubber be the one who looks a little further into this with Mr. Farley. Sometimes when we ask a question like that, with staff in general, it throws a little panic. And Mr. Greeno even, I've seen him, we'll throw him a question and he panics and he looks too hard at the question. It looks so deep that you can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing. Because when that happens, you miss the mark 100%, you miss everything. And I feel like you know what I'm talking about, but I have seen that. Well, I don't know right off, take some time to think about it. Look, like you said, is it U.S. Frozen Waffles was able to get this? Is there a grant for that? Don't think about what's right in front of you necessarily.
Actually, that's a good piece of advice. I want to speak to it, make sure that I'm understanding it. One thing that my previous involvement with the county, my previous professional involvement, taught me is never stand up and say, I don't know. When the judge pointed at you and it was your turn to argue, you didn't get up and say, Judge, I don't know. But what you're saying is, when they ask these questions, it's perfectly acceptable for staff to say, you know what, we'll look into that and get back to you.
I would much rather have that.
That's something, and I've actually been writing notes to myself and for this, and that's one of the things I wrote down is, you have to get comfortable saying, I don't know, we'll look into that. But that's what I hear you
just
saying.
know 2 years later, I'll ask, what did you find out?
What did we ever do?
You are a memory guy. You remember 2 years ago you said something.
All right, other questions?
How do we do our fuel and oil? I saw it on here, and I know with all the fluctuation currently with fuel and oil prices across the board, do we buy and have big tanks scattered around the county? Do we use fuel cards, fuel reward programs? What do we do?
Yes, sir. What we do is, many years ago, we have, tanks were set up. We have one tank, can't give you the exact size, maybe 10,000 gallon tank at LEC. We have 3 at Roads and Bridges. One is unleaded, one is on-road, one is off-road. And then at Solid Waste, we have 2 tanks. One is on-road and off-road. And we use a local provider that gives a state contract price on that. And then we just periodically, as we need it, fill it up. We try to do a full tank because it's cheaper instead of doing a half load.
So our fire engines and our generators, our backup generators, like there's one here, they just fill those.
Now some like EMS, they have smaller tanks at their locations, and those are filled up by a local company. If they can come by one of those places, they can. We have a fuel system where you can put in your decal number and your PIN number, and then it turns on the pumps and everything, and then we charge departments back for that. We do have a couple fleet cards, and it's mainly for the Public Service Commission because they're so far down in Liberty. It doesn't really make sense for them to come all the way up to LEC or go all the way out to Roads and Bridges to fuel up their tanks. So we use the state fleet system to purchase fuel for them. But that's only a couple cars down there. The majority of vehicles are fueled through our 3 pump stations, and it depends on type of vehicle.
The reason I ask is, and you talk about a $10,000 gallon tank, if you fill that tank up before all this started, gas was closer to $2 a gallon. If you hit it last week, it was $1.30 a gallon.
We've paid down to about 86 cents about 3 weeks ago, and we're paying $1.15 right now for unleaded.
That's why I'm asking is if we're still getting the best bang for our buck.
Have we got any extra tanks? My question, remember our biofuel project?
Yes, I do.
They sold it on
What
GovDeals.
happened to that? Those
I-
tanks?
Sold it on
I
GovDeals.
yeah, we did sell that, did we not?
Did we did?
Yeah, we did.
It would be, it would be a prudent thing if we had capacity somewhere with fuel tanks of some sort. And it's worth looking at like the stockade. If there are fuel tanks out there, or tanks, oil tanks that we can put fuel into, there's a windfall to that because prices are going to go back up. And this is a great time to buy futures and fuel, which is what we would be doing.
Right. But it'd be pretty expensive to put those tanks in, especially with all the DHEC regulations.
I was
that go-
just saying existing tanks. I wasn't
Right,
saying.
we do.
Wow.
You should be,
Off the cuff comment about if we have tank space somewhere,
Yeah,
this would be time to filling it up.
I'm constantly looking at it. When we can, even if it's a split load, we try to do split loads to keep them as full as we can, because generally a full load is about 7,500, depends if it's on-road, off-road, or unleaded. Sometimes you can get more with unleaded, you can get 8,500 in there. But, so we try to look at, in fact, I did 3 loads this week, one for LEC, it got down, so I try to fill it right back up. Solid waste, I did a split load on them, and roads and bridges, I did a split load between the 3 tanks, just to fill them up and keep them filled up. So I am constantly doing that.
I figured that much.
Yeah, I really try to watch that, because like I said, you don't want to do a partial load, because they're going to charge you a higher rate, because the delivery cost is still the same.
Right.
So there is a little bit of an art to it.
Yeah, and that's the reason I ask, and I know you would know, I know with all the 3 cents a gallon off of some of these rewards programs and this, that, and the other. And
Well, and there again, we don't have to pay federal excise tax, so you're probably saying, I don't know the exact, but it's probably about 27 cents that we don't have to pay that, whereas if you go to a place like that, you're going to pay it.
Plus you're buying wholesale too.
yeah,
Right, we're buying wholesale, we don't have any profit in there. They do, I don't know how much it is.
Yeah, you're paying significantly.
Generally, we
less.
pay about 30 cents less than what you see at a normal gas station, is how I always relate it.
which is saving tax dollars, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, because if you look now, we paid, I think the load at LEC this week was $1.15 is what we ended up paying net. And I think gas prices at a normal gas station for unleaded is probably, and that's 87. You're probably paying around $1.40, $1.50.
We handed out gas cards, how much more would that be costing us?
And keeping up with it and everything too.
Yep.
okay, cool. Other questions? All right, so my question for you guys is this. This is, we've got a list, and Mr. Roper, you may be able to speak to some to this too. You've got a list of things you're gonna get back to everybody. I'm trying to be a good steward of y'all's time. Our next scheduled meeting that we have is our June 1st council meeting. At that time, I had planned on doing 3rd reading on the budget with any additional changes that you guys wanted to make, or suggestions or motions or all that stuff, and be done so that we can move on towards other things. I'm happy to schedule another budget work session if you think we need one, but my point on this is I want to know what you guys would like to look at. I mean, currently today is the 14th, is that correct, of May? Correct. So the only thing that we currently have scheduled is our next meeting would be June the 1st. We've got Memorial Day on the 25th. My question is, do you, and we could turn the June the 1st into a budget work session and have a special called council on another date. I was trying to stay away from the 8th because that's right before the primary on the 9th, and I figured people would be busy. We could put, what I don't want to do is put you guys at.
So that's what I was just asking, if we have flexibility, particularly in light of the fact that this budget is so similar to last year's. We've got some flexibility. We wouldn't want to get into the last week of June, though.
Right, that's where I'm getting at. So I'm not going to express my opinion. What do you guys want to do? I'd like to hear from y'all. Okay, I can wait.
I'm good. I'm good for June 1st, and what I would like the administrator to do is come up with a way to come up with that extra $20,000 or so that we need for this medical control if that seems to be something that
Yeah,
Vice Chairman
I'm-
Powers is thinking that it's a value. I don't want to just
I'm with
do
you,
it.
I'm with you on that. I'm with the finding that $20,000 in, but he's still got, or we've still got to be able to look at the final thing on that.
I know it's asking a lot of Vice Chairman to review that between now and then, so he can say.
Oh, he's
yeah.
got all the time in the world, man. He ain't doing nothing.
I got time.
You like it? What do you guys think?
It'd be nice to have a presentation from Ray Farley.
Well, I'm saying we can,
Yeah.
but I can call another budget work session, or we can do that primarily. I mean, I know we're going to talk about the agenda coming up for the June the 1st, but I don't know of any other major pressing things other than the budget.
We'll have a couple of executive session items for that meeting.
Yes, I know one.
There'll be a litigation update that day to
Okay.
bring you up to speed on some litigation. We're going to try to have Amy Snyder here to talk about a couple of the different lawsuits out there. I know that we'll have that, and Ray Farley is wanting to come back to you to update you on one other project he's working on.
Okay,
So he could do a little thing during regular session.
but he could talk to us about the other during the regular session.
That's right.
Mr. Chairman, is
Yes.
this the sheriff's office budget? Is that what this piece of paper is?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. What?
Is this the sheriff's office budget? Is that what this paper is? Sir?
2-page report for the agenda book.
Page and a quarter.
Show me I don't know what you're looking at.
It was in the landing.
Oh, that was that packet he gave us last time, I think, right?
It was sitting on my table tonight.
That was actually something Councilman Whitehurst asked for.
Oh.
He wanted a 3-year comparison of the sheriff's department. I actually put 4
Oh,
years
yeah,
out there.
okay,
And then
I'm
I put
sorry.
some notes, what had happened over those 4 years. Didn't have specific dollars, because that's,
We didn't even address this.
yeah.
So, okay, so this is 4 years,
It's actually 3 and then the next year.
The recommended.
3,
budget.
and then the recommendation, and how it's changed.
We've gone up $200,000 on food in the last 2 years.
Well, one is you merge the prison, and two,
But that was last
we're-
20's budget was $100,000 increase.
yeah.
Wait, where do you see that?
It's in the middle, lower middle.
Do we have what we spent
Oh.
at the stockade on food? I
could
thought
get-
they had one company doing all that.
Yeah, I
Didn't they
thought
say
They
they
did.
merged all that and one company's gonna do it all?
We did.
Right, and this is what the one company's charging us,
So they've increased it by $200,000 the last 2 years?
with the merger of the prison.
No,
and
no, no,
everything.
because they were doing both of them.
Well,
Weren't they-
that's,
weren't
yeah,
they-
they were doing both. They were,
But we merged
they were moving it, food between, from
Yeah,
one to the
yeah,
other.
and we were supposed to
But
save all
2020
this money because they have one company providing everything.
But we merged the prison, and I think I have a note on there that we merged the prison in 2020. So we took that money from the prison and we merged it over to the sheriff's department. I believe that's why it went from $300,000 to $400,000.
So now they're going up another 100.
Now want to go with another $100,000?
So it's a $100,000 increase from what so is this was something that we put out for bids, I believe, because that was one of the first,
No, the
He
sheriff
sold
came
us this
back.
bill
The
of
sheriff
goods.
came back.
He sold
Right.
us this big bill of goods about how
they
they were.
came in and said, they were, how they're gonna save money on it.
And what I'm hearing is the food's not that great. Have you heard that?
Yes.
I don't want to know.
I can say that it's probably not that great on a good day, but there are minimum standards that, they have to meet. There are minimum nutritional standards that have to be met. And there were some complaints a few months back about the vendor, and I'm struggling to come up with a name right now, who supplies the food. I can't think of the name, but there was some information that they weren't really giving us what we needed to feel good about what we were feeding. And so I had asked at that time for the sheriff to look at the possibility of us going back to preparing our own. Could we more cost efficiently prepare our own food? And he looked at that, and they came back to me and met with me and said that the actual labor of preparing the food, it would be a huge complexity for them to undertake, having to get all that shipped there and manage all that. But they thought they could save money. The problem is the dietitian, the expertise that the company brought. He said it wasn't economically feasible. So I had asked the question some months ago. Since then, they report to me that the quality has gone up, perhaps because we started asking some questions. I think that's probably true. But the other thing, and the reason I stood up initially is to tell you that I ask about the same question you're asking about, because I see these budget adjustments. When people ask for more money, they have to find it somewhere else in their budget, and they come over my desk through the Munis system. And so I see these budget adjustments, and I had asked the sheriff, don't you think we should put this out to bid? And he said, well, there's not really anybody else out there that does this around here. It's kind of a one-horse town, is what he had told us. So I've asked these questions, but the sheriff's come back with that information.
I'm not satisfied.
The 500 is what's trending right now, that's what we're putting there. If the word's trending.
What do you mean by trending?
That's what we're paying on a monthly basis. It's about.
Oh, I understand, it's a 25% increase. Right. So the question, I understand that's what we're paying, the question is why?
Well, I can't answer that, but I can just tell you that's where it's trending, and that's where Mr. Roper talked about, we've got to transfer, they've got to transfer money out of different accounts.
I thought this was kind of a fix, as I remember, there was a fixed number with this thing where they said we would take care of prisoners.
There's also population to take into account, and I don't know that that's the sole reason for the increase, but we can certainly investigate that further.
I would, because you're talking 25% increase in food cost. We haven't increased the jail and other inmates by 25%. We're supposed to be reducing that number.
The cost of food in the grocery stores is coming up, what, 2 to 4%?
That's here in the last month or so.
Yeah.
Because
Same
of
with the medical services, that was another contracted service, and it was another one of those fixed, but if you look, it's crept up as well.
And medical, the medical service is another sore point for us, just to full disclosure here, gentlemen, not to open a can of worms, but you're gonna get an update. You're gonna get an update on June 1st about pending litigation. Our contract with Southern Health Partners says that they will indemnify us. They'll defend, a duty to defend as well, for when we are sued because of lack of medical attention. Now, we have been successful up to now really resolving a lot of these cases, but Southern Health Partner has done exactly nothing to live up to that. And it's a source of frustration for me. They're the one providing the medical services up there, and they do not stand behind their work with Pickens County. And it frustrates me to no end. Now, I'm not trying to open up a can of worms here. This came up, and I am frustrated with it. I've expressed that frustration to the sheriff, that these guys, we sign a contract, we pay them a fee, they do the service, and they're supposed to help defend a lawsuit. And y'all can ask Ms. Snyder about it when she comes to give you an update on how successful we've been with that.
well, but if it's part of the contract, where's the contract and saying, here, it's your responsibility?
So I guess
We've done that. It's called tendering a defense. We've tendered the defense to them, and Ms. Snyder will give you more specific information on that. It's a source of frustration for me.
That one needs to be continued June 1st.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and if a 25% increase, I think we need to rebid this thing. We can't put it out to bid. Can we have the authority to do that, or does the sheriff have to do that?
We absolutely have the authority to put that out.
Why don't we put it back? I mean, you're looking at, that's a huge increase.
It's a big increase from year over year, I agree with that, but it's not as big as increase from what we're paying currently. Like I said before, within this current year, they're having to transfer money just to keep up with the bills that are already incurred.
Yeah, that's what led to the questions, exactly.
But why is that though? Why are we having to transfer money? I mean, why is it costing so much more?
I would prefer for sure.
It's called invoice creep.
We can have it on June 1st.
Well, I mean,
Review the budget.
Right.
the cost of food
They're just paying it. And this, typically you see government, when they get into a contract, people tend to abuse it. Start throw a little more on this invoice here, a little more, then it just gets paid. You know, and part of our job is to review this stuff and go, well, and this is actually the sheriff's job to be saying, why are you not doing this? But he can't run his own budget. He just passes it on to us and go, well, yeah, it's increased, pay it.
Can I ask about two more items? Just
Sure.
Councilman Whitehurst's gonna love this one. The electricity and heating fuel, we built in a new efficient building, and I expect it to go up because there's more square feet. But it's $110,000 more.
And we're not using another building.
And we're not using the prison, to Chairman Costner's point.
Well, I don't know what they're doing at
But it's not coming out of this budget.
pardon me.
The prison isn't coming out, the old stockade on County Farm Road.
If I'm not mistaken,
Is it coming out of this budget?
if there's anything that's left from it, we moved it to the sheriff's budget. We did that in 2020. This is really, the increase on this is the new cost of the detention center. When we got the new bill in, it's about $10,000 a month, along with what we were paying at the sheriff's department for the existing building.
So we're still paying for that old building,
So the sheriff,
Which one at the,
LEC.
yeah.
I don't know how they're using it. We haven't, I don't think council's discussed what they're gonna do with the building.
Is it being conditioned and heated and cooled, and are there offices there?
So I can't give you room by room, but I can tell you generally what they're doing. They're still using all the office space they were using. You know, that, they're still using dispatch like they were using. All those places are still occupied. The several areas in the actual old jail are being used for storage of evidence. They're literally storing evidence in the old cells and everything. So they do keep some utility, light, heat, and air going in there, because it's a good location for them, in their opinion, to store their evidence in some of the
So
old records.
we're still paying utilities
Yes.
on a building that
I'm actually going back to, I want to go back to the stockade.
okay.
Yes.
There shouldn't be any remnant. I can go get a bill and bring it for the next council meeting. But as far as I know, that section's not being used. It may still be, the meter still may be turned on and you're paying some of the bills. Right, I'm talking about that also. So there could be some remnants of that building that we haven't completely turned off the meter.
Well, we
And
said
if that's
we
the
were gonna
case,
keep
we
it
would
from
turn,
freezing, and we were gonna keep it from getting 200 degrees. We were gonna just kind of, just the bare minimum to keep the building from dilapidating.
yeah. And to my knowledge, that bill we moved, and I can verify in looking at the detailed spreadsheet, that we moved those bills from the prison over to the sheriff's department when the sheriff took over the prison.
Right, but he doesn't own it, he's not in charge of the prison anymore, that's back to the county, so it shouldn't be part of his budget.
The physical.
That's fine, I mean, it's just where do we want to charge it to? It's still going to be a bill, it's not going to be any
charged under
saving.
the county, I don't want it, it's not part of his budget, because he doesn't control that building anymore.
Yeah, that's
So that
fine.
would come out of general fund, but as a separate, the stockade is its separate thing now, it's not under the control.
We can charge it to roads and bridges. I'm not sure who's using
Right,
it.
but that needs to not be part of that, but the evidence room, isn't the evidence room that they had before in the courthouse?
There's a records room in the courthouse, there's not.
Where have they been putting their evidence?
They've had places, they've been putting it, and again, I can't give you room by room.
Before the jails were full.
Right, when the jail was full, they were storing evidence in other locations, but they now determined that it's better to store it in parts of the old jail.
Part of their records was stored down in archives, and then we took all that out and made it into the EOC building downstairs. I think y'all have seen that, but we had to move everything out of archives for that. So we made departments that weren't in this building to come get their stuff, and they had to store it wherever they could
So
store
they're
it.
storing some of that at the LEC.
Pardon me?
That's right.
Yeah, they had a big cage downstairs, and they had to move that out so we could make room for the new EOC operations.
Other places have used the old stockade or old jails for evidence storage I've seen in the past, where it's a good secure place for them to do that.
So, you had another question?
No, that answered my question. If it's about $10,000 a month for those utility bills at the new facility, wow. That's it. And that's not on the sheriff. That's just cost of.
Do we
being in
pay those
business.
bills? We pay those bills?
That's what he's talking about, the
Yeah,
electricity and.
we
I know,
pay those.
but so you're seeing the bills come in and that's reflected in this number? Okay.
That's
This
the
is your numbers that you've come up with based on what you see? Okay.
That's the $110,000 additional dollars would be the new facility.
There you go.
I just out of curiosity, because it really doesn't make a hill of beans difference. The telephone dropped 14, 13, 12, and then jumped up to 20.
And now they have
coming into question.
television.
Well, the television's a whole nother, that's correct, but the telephone I'm more interested in.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because it was dropping and then jumped.
And apparently it's not long distance.
No.
No.
Or cell service.
I'll look at that.
And I'm assuming we added cable at the new facility? Is that what that television is? We didn't have cable before, but now we do?
They may have been, I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a new deal. I'm not sure which company it is, but it's, what they said their baby systems will push.
Okay. Those are just the things that jumped out at me on their budget.
Yeah.
Can you look at our food service stuff and say, well, the medical, I think is gonna be another conversation, but, you know, every few years, we need to look at rebidding things, and not get into a habit of just.
Well, I know the association that, I'm a member of, we have a talk group, and that issue was brought up, but it really came back, and I think it was on the food contract, not the, physician side of it or the health side of it, is a lot of them use the same company that we use. And I think that gets back to what you were saying, there's not a lot of other companies that really do this. I wouldn't say they have a monopoly, but
maybe
in South
maybe
Carolina.
we need to look to do it ourselves, and if we have to hire a dietitian.
Well, we did that several years ago, and that's why we went with this, to try to control our costs.
Well, because we were told by the sheriff we were gonna save all this money, and now what's happened, we've got this invoice creep going on, and we keep going up and up and up and up and up.
Well, maybe there's, maybe since that time, during the pandemic is when all these new companies start up. So anybody out there listening, there's an idea for a new company to start up.
Or we need to reevaluate doing it ourselves again. Because it's about saving money and getting good quality food, and I know the food has not been that great.
How do you know?
Because I hear stories.
No, I'm just,
I had a few meals there
I'm
myself.
teasing you. Okay, so back to my original question. So y'all, we're all good with gathering the information, you disseminating it to everybody, and then we move forward on finalizing the budget on the 1st?
I think that'll work.
Cool. Mr. Whitehurst, Mr. Hendricks?
I think
I'll
that's
come up with
fine.
about 20 more questions.
Oh,
between now and then.
sure.
And by the way, those are good questions.
Thanks, sir.
All right. Well, not hearing anything else, I can ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor? We are adjourned from our session. Thank you guys very much.